We do have a quorum now, I believe. We're going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. Justin, will you please take roll?
Aaron Sandine.
Here.
Joe Anderson.
Here.
Michael Brazier. Here. Amy Brooks. Stephen Campbell. Jan Howe.
Here.
Tracy Montgomery.
Here.
Arthur Antia.
Here.
William Pribble. Patrick Quinn. Kathleen Robinson.
Here.
Dan Wills. Dwayne Woody. Mike Worrell. And we have a quorum.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Justin. First of all, before we get started on the agenda, I want to welcome Karen Allen. She is joining our team part-time. Karen joins us with 30 years of experience from the City of Tempe as communications managers. She'll be helping us working on the Goal 2 gap closure, as well as chasm and narrow branding and other projects as well. So thank you very much, Karen. Moving on the agenda, the first action item is to approve the February minutes. Any questions regarding the minutes?
Mr. Mike Brazier. I did dial in on that meeting.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you. Any other questions on those minutes? Can I get a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Carries. The third item on the agenda is public safety broadband. Michael Britt is going to provide an update.
Commissioners, the legislation recently passed for the HR 3630. Then we'll go through some of the key recent events that are impacting this effort, and then the approval item or action item we have is to form a Arizona Public Safety Broadband Network Board. The legislation was signed February 22nd, and that's kickoff date for all the other critical elements that are part of the legislation. Key items are the D block being allocated to public safety, forming the FirstNet group that is responsible for the build-out of the national network, and working with the states in roles and responsibilities and so forth. Authorizes the auction of radio and TV frequency to self-fund the effort. The plan is to auction off, the estimates are $28 billion. $7 billion would go to building out the network, and $21 would go to deficit reduction. There's also a major component for some jurisdictions in which there was a give back of some of the T-band, but that does not impact Arizona. Closest neighbor that I think it does impact is Los Angeles. So on the timeline of the key components, the first thing, the FCC set up the Public Safety Interoperability Board. Their responsibility was to define the minimum interoperable requirements. So that group was formed March 22nd and has until May 22nd to complete that task. Those minimum requirements were used to determine states opting in and opting out, which I'll go through in a bit. FirstNet is to be stood up by August 22nd, and then FirstNet will plan the national network and work with the states to determine the build-out of the infrastructure in each state. The delivery of those RFPs to the state, they're calling them RFPs in terms of the infrastructure for the state. That's the one date that was not Estimates are probably 18 months to 2 years after formed. When the states do receive those RFPs for 90 days, either opt in or opt out. Opting in means prefer that FirstNet build out that infrastructure and maintain it, and then opting out, the state would rather manage that build out. So once the state decides if they opt out, then they have 180 days to put together a plan to build that infrastructure, and that plan gets submitted to the FCC for approval or denial. Again, utilizing the minimum interoperability requirements established by the Interoperability Board up top. Okay. Funding components are $135 million for state and local, basically R&D to figure out the need and what infrastructure they already have in place. And those grants would be coordinated through a single government within the state. $150 million for planning for next generation 911. But states that have rated the 911 funds would not be eligible, and that includes Arizona. There's $300 million allocated to the PSCR in Boulder, who's doing the integration and interoperability testing of all the vendor hardware and software, and then $7 billion for the actual network construction. All right, just real high-level architecture of the public safety broadband network. We have starting down at the bottom, we have the cell towers, the antennae, and the E-node Bs, and then regional LANs or WANs that connect all the towers. That component is what state either opt in or opt out. A core, the administration and control, or the network operating center, or whatever you want to call it, for the network would be part of the national architecture, along with the backbone for interconnection to switching networks and so forth. So in the opt-in situation, the entire infrastructure would be built and run by the FirstNet, and states would pay a fee to access the network. The only thing the state would pay for, or the jurisdiction would pay for, is the user equipment and then fees. In opting out, the state's responsible for the RAN architecture, and this component right here wasn't really clear whether the state would have to pay for the backhaul to the network. That pipe could get fairly in architecture. But I have a guess as to what that's going to be. All right. So timing on the opt-in or opt-out. If the state decides to build its own, then the governor must inform FirstNet, the FCC, and NTIA, all three of them, no later than 90 days after the RFP. And then 180 days, the state must come up with a plan that's submitted for FCC approval, and some technical requirements put together by the Interoperability Board, and then be interoperable with the nationwide network. The timeline for the FCC approval is not defined. All right, in terms of fees, there's been a lot of discussion about revenues that you can generate. There's a lot of mention of public-private partnerships within the legislation, and that fees could be collected for the care and feeding of the RAN part of the network, the state infrastructure. And so the fees cannot exceed the amount required to cover the cost of maintaining. And that's whether you opt in or opt out, whether FirstNet's covering that or whether the state's covering that. So it's really a net settlement no gain. The fees that are authorized are user subscription fees, public-private partnerships, backhaul service, fiber network, so forth, and then access to towers and any kind of infrastructure rent that you could apply. So, good sources of information, detailed, but the Anna Gomez gave a real good talk through communications, and it gives a good idea what NTIA is thinking about this network. It put together a summary of the legislation that's in detail, goes through bullet by bullet, and put together a kind of a short white paper on what the SWIC's role is in terms of interacting with the public safety network. And then a governor's view or recommended view of what a governor or a state should be taking into consideration. And Kevin Rogers shot us an email indicating this APCO Tech Forum. It's a real good back to Broadband 101, okay, and what the impact of this new legislation has on public safety broadband in general.
All right. And I should mention that all the hyperlinks during this presentation are on our website. You can follow through to see all of those resources.
Okay, so that's part one of the presentation, just kind of the legislation. Does anybody have any questions on that legislation? Okay. It takes a while and a few iterations through it to absorb the ramifications and what it means to us, and I'm not even there yet. Okay. As a result of this legislation, a lot of activity is going on a daily basis. I'm hitting the highlights here. This is not everything that's going on, but there was a Public Safety Broadband Stakeholders Meeting in Boulder. Those hyperlinks, the overview and highlights, the meeting agenda and slides. There were a number of vendor presentations about the care and feeding of the network and what a major task it is. There was one presentation by basically the help desk for the AT&T network, and what the impact of going from 4G was on his help desk costs. It gave a pretty good idea about what being on the bleeding edge is all about. A last presentation I gave, we were talking about the numbering scheme. Since that time, the Operating Advisory Committee has recommended SAIC to be the numbering scheme administrator, and SAIC has been recognized by the FCC to handle that task. And both Charlotte and Harris County, Texas have requested and received their network identifiers for their upcoming deployment. So the scheme has been defined and the numbers have actually been allocated. All of the NPSBN working groups that were taking the capabilities of 4G LTE and translating those capabilities, such as priority and local control, into what public safety needs as requirements. They are currently trying to finalize and finish up their work in a hurry so that all that information can be incorporated into a single document, which is NPSBN Statement of Requirements for Public Safety. Now, this document was a foundation or a kind of a linchpin written in 2007, so it's being updated with the working group efforts and taking into consideration policy decisions that have already been made, such as we've already decided that we're going to have a single PLN ID for the nationwide network. Now, NTIA, who manages BTOP funds for 7 of the 21 waiver recipients, about $500 million worth. They have concern that we're in this kind of waiting period. The legislation has been passed, the money's been allocated, but FirstNet hasn't been stood up. So their concern is, what if we spend this BTOP fund, the fund is not interoperable? So they're debating, kind of asking the BTOP recipients to hold off on buying any LTE equipment. But that delays their projects by 2 years. And they've already had plans, they've already got the ball rolling, and so forth. So it's an awkward situation right now. So their waiver recipients are preparing a response to ask them to reconsider, maybe get at the bargaining table to talk through what the issues are, and to try and reduce the risk. The FCC has asked for comment on the issue of the upcoming license transition. The licenses were 2-year licenses. They expire September 7th. They would need to eventually transition from the PSST, the Public Safety Spectrum Trust, to FirstNet. And they want to also incorporate the fact that V-Block is included. And the waiver recipients really like to just go ahead and have that transition take place and have another 2 years worth of waiver capability. So the FCC has opened up a docket for comment. Comments are due April 20th. The OAC is working on a generic response, and Mesa TOPAZ is working on a specific response for what the impact is to Mesa.
Do we have a sense of what that's doing to Mesa in relation to the NTIA comments?
Dale's here.
Yeah, well, frankly, we're trying to gauge the impact right now. And we, in fact, even before the official response to the inquiry, I sent a letter just yesterday, in fact, asking some specific questions of NTIA and the FCC as it relates to our waiver status. And we're really trying to determine, number one, whether we're going to have a valid waiver at the end of this whole thing to build our network. We're in RFP stage, as Michael mentioned, and it's critical for us to know if we're going to have that waiver moving forward with that rolled out.
And the NTIA's concerns are really valid. I mean, there are people out there pouring concrete right now, and we have a real possibility of a whole bunch of stovepipes being built across the country with this going on, with competing technologies, when we did not establish, a common architecture yet. And that's, we've been down this road. We've been down this road 100 times, and it's, we're at that critical juncture. Do we hold a little bit, or do we try and put some common template planning into it, at least force people into a common end at the end of this? I mean, there are states, New Jersey's sitting on $39 million. They've spent $9 so far.
Right.
And yet other people are full boat ahead in competing technologies. This is exactly what, when we started this whole interoperability dance, was one of the things that we said that we weren't going to, we were not going to go down this road again.
I want to make sure I answer your question. Did I touch on what you needed there?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. I will say that for us, as we evaluate this, unless the architecture is not going to be LTE-based, we're not sure if everybody should be held up in terms of build-out. The standards are pretty well defined in that area, so we're hoping we can get some direction. Because we plan on, not only are we required, but we plan on being fully interoperable with our rollout. So we would prefer to get going sooner than later and not have to wait for the complete rollout. However, we know that we need to be mindful of everything you just mentioned.
Okay. Other key event is the Public Safety Interoperability Board is holding a working session, open, April 23rd, 8:30 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time, so it's fishing time for us, 5:30 a.m. if you want to join in on that. panel discussion. It would be about 2 hours 3 hours. 4 45-minute sessions. They want to validate that they're covering the right scope, and that they're covering the interfaces and vulnerability requirements, especially related to priority and mobility, and then network security. They have also established an open docket and questions ahead of time that could be covered during the panel. As we mentioned, they're in the middle of the RFP process. They received bids from Alcatel, Motorola, and Raytheon. The new team was kicked off March 12th, and they've met every Thursday. The team plans to complete the review process in a couple weeks with a follow-up questions to the vendors and/or best and final. It hasn't been decided yet. And again, we mentioned the conundrum here. It wasn't specifically for Mesa, but this was a good place to put it in the presentation. They're really the rock and a hard place in terms of NTIA said, yes, you can continue to work on your cell sites and your infrastructure build-out that's not LTE related, but then they don't have any real expectation to have a working network for between 18 months and 24 months. All right. Getting down to Arizona specific. On March 13th, a briefing was given to the governor's supervisors with ADOA, ASAP, Department of Homeland Security, DPS, and PSCIC. We reviewed HR 3630 and what the impact is to Arizona, decision points, and so forth. And decided to have PSCIC along with ASAP to take the lead in helping the strategy. PSCIC to get input and advice from the PSCC and all the public safety stakeholders. And come up with the research and recommendations. And then PSCIC would serve as a central point of contact for interested parties / vendors to get uniform and consistent information out to those interested parties, and so that we become aware of everybody who's involved. All right. In terms of the Arizona Public Safety Broadband Network Project Plan, these are the key elements. Continue to track the National Public Safety Network progress, work with the Arizona Public Safety Community to advise the PSCC regarding statewide standards. In other words, what Arizona Public Safety thinks the interoperability standards need to be. Work with the Arizona Public Safety Community to plan on how we will interact with the National Public Safety Network. In other words, how we manage the feeds, how we manage the allocation of numbers, numbering scheme, and so forth. Prep for the grant request under the State and Local Implementation Grant Program. Then provide input on the SCIP update as it relates to broadband planning, because we have a SCIP update coming up. Plan and prepare for the RFP and be able to advise the state on in-out, opt-in or opt-out decision. And then also work with the Digital Arizona project, which is broadband for everything but public safety, let's say, education, health, and so forth. And then continue to report to the PSCC on progress. All right. Upcoming milestones or some that have passed. April 6th, the Arizona Broadband Project, or Digital Arizona, was successful in getting legislation passed to have ADOT actively pursue laying fiber conduit along every state and county road. This will probably be a key factor in determining our public safety build-out if that conduit is available for use or can be supported by this funding. We mentioned the FCC response on the waiver transition, the Technical Advisory Board having that working session. Then in May 22nd, we've got a SCIP implementation workshop, and we need to bring the broadband issue to the forefront, or at least make it a part of that effort. And then the Interoperability Board is to submit their minimum requirements to the FCC. And then the FCC has 1 month until June 22nd to accept those requirements with revisions if needed.
Mike, before you move on there.
Okay.
Just on that very first bullet, there's a little sensitivity to that. So the Senate Bill 1402 changes the definition of infrastructure to include information, and it allows ADOT to coordinate. It doesn't necessarily direct them to do.
Sorry.
So no, and I just
terminology.
I want to be very, very sensitive to that point.
Makes sense. Coordinate. All right. So what we would like to do is recommend that PSCC establish a working group, the Arizona Public Safety Broadband Network Working Group, to provide advice and recommendation to the PSCC as it relates to the national network. And then we have a few discussion points. The scope or the action items listed in the plan. The participants, one group that I would like to see involved is the regional radio system executive directors, because they're used to a fee-based service, and it looks like that we're going to be heading in that direction with public safety broadband, so definitely get their input as we work through this. And then also PSEP management as to what it means to Next Gen 911 and how Arizona's going to address that issue. There are a lot of things to cover, both technical and policy, so we see more than likely we'll have subgroups formed to tackle specific issues. And then we plan on monthly updates back to the PSCC in addition to our usual meetings.
Mike, again, the timeline of this group before they have to make a decision or a recommendation.
I think the key thing coming up is the grant. The first step or the first decision point or the first action item is that submission of the grant. And I believe, it's not specified in the legislation, but I believe first quarter 2013 is as early as we can expect to be able to submit those. And then as it forms up, we'll respond to whether it's going to be managed through NTIA, through Department of Homeland Security, through Arizona Department. There are lots of open issues there. But that's item one, I think.
Any questions? So, Michael, I want to thank you for putting this together. I know it's been an ever-moving, changing landscape. Yeah. And it's definitely a huge challenge to wrap your brain around it to make it this succinct. So I think in talking with the governor's office, this was kind of the recommendation that came from that. I think it's good of a place as any to put it. And I think it does give us kind of that tie-in with multiple agencies and groups, and to be able to kind of coordinate that communication. So with that, can I get a recommendation?
One of the reasons, Commissioners, why we'd like to have the PSCC Director Office to establish this group, and that's the approval document that you have there with you, is so that, one, it helps to kind of bootstrap this entire effort to establish a group of folks that have both the operational and technical background as well as folks with policy background to help guide us through this. As you saw through Mr. Brisk's presentation, things are moving very quickly. Within the next month and a half, those minimum interoperability requirements will have already been established. And so while we had been doing the best we can over the past 2 months since legislation was assigned to provide input on the national level and keep up with it, it is moving incredibly quickly, and we want to make sure that Arizona can have its impact on how this network rolls out.
Absolutely. And I think, it's good to coordinate that centrally so that we're not all individually researching that and pulling from different sources and kind of try to stabilize that. So next steps would be, Michael, just to kind of walk through this. So
Sure.
We set this working group up, kind of what would those next steps and what do you kind of envision?
I believe get a working group together and focus on, do the next level drill down on those bullet points. Especially get more detail on the earlier ones, that we have a little bit of understanding as to what they're going to be. And then basically want to try and get some kind of working documents and charters set up to set goals for what public safety in Arizona wants to do with broadband. Because, a lot of it may even be outreach at this point to kind of put forth what the impacts could be, and then get feedback at the same time as to what public safety wants out of the situation.
So I have a question regarding federal rights of way. So FirstNet, and maybe this hasn't been come up, but it's definitely one of the questions that's in my head, especially gone through all the rights of way conversations we've been going through with just broadband in general in this way. Has that come up, and what access, versus opt-in versus opt-out are states going to have from a regional perspective?
The issue about whether FirstNet could push for right-of-way access to federal highways?
Yeah, is a big one, absolutely.
Is a big one. And those discussions have come up from time to time, but not in a concerted way.
Okay.
And again, mostly because FirstNet has not been stood up, so these are the existing federal agencies that are talking about what they could and could not. Also, as a result of the waiver recipient activity, the interaction between the FCC and the airports has been an issue in terms of working with local jurisdictions in public safety. And then we all know how the issues we have around border patrol and the local public safety. So those kinds of interactions and interfaces need to be dealt with. Those are going to be the hard nuts to crack on this. You're talking just generic public safety and first responders, and everybody's kind of got mutual aid agreements and so forth in place, and it's not as problematic, but then you end up with these situations that are going to have to be addressed. But definitely the right-of-way issues, because I think Arizona could be a model in terms of the ability to get the backhaul in place, because I think the backhaul is going to be a bigger issue than most people think.
Yep, absolutely.
Backhaul is actually going to be all of it. If it's LTE and carrier right now or anything else, it's all tied back to backhaul. And so, the right away, the railroads found that out in the early networks. They own coast-to-coast right away, and that was the creation of Sprint. So, and ADOT's not new to this conversation, but I've been in a couple national conversations where this does come up, and that all of these networks are so heavily backhaul dependent that whoever owns that strip of, that piece of right-of-way has an opportunity to actually take first position in some of these conversations, especially in this public-private partnership. So, given that we collectively are the landowner here, I think like Michael said, once FirstNet stands up, that's going to have to be one of the first orders of business. So, the fact that we already have it, that conversation in play, I think gives us a real opportunity. But it's one of those things that's not tangible. You don't talk on it. It's in the dirt. It's going to be a quantum part of the conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's been interesting because with the broadband planning and mapping grants, we've been mapping that out from that perspective. But with our assumptions, we've been not using a lot of the federal highway rights of way.
Sure.
get a motion to create this new working group?
Motions. Go ahead, Mike.
Thank you.
No problem.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? This motion carries, and we are establishing a new working group. Thank you very much, Mike. Fourth thing on the agenda is the annual SCIP review and update from Justin.
And I'll just say, folks who are interested in serving on that working group, please contact our office as we begin to stand that effort up. So next step, the 2012 Statewide Communications Interoperability Plan revision. Our Arizona first established a SCIP back in 2007 as a grant requirement from the Department of Homeland Security. Our SCIP then has been updated several times. Most recently, actually around 2009, 2010, we added into our SCIP a requirement to update our SCIP on an annual basis to continue to make sure that our strategy continues to be the direction that we want to head in Arizona. We typically have started this process in January. However, this year we're going to be having a SCIP implementation workshop coming up in May, and so we adjusted our schedule in order to, one, get more of the broadband stuff percolated out and formed a little bit better, and two, to better line up with our SCIP implementation workshop. The current version of the SCIP was approved last year at this time. We've had two significant revisions to the SCIP over the last several years. So this year we're not looking at a huge overhaul of the SCIP, but instead we really want to kind of focus in on improving the action plans that are documented initiatives, making technical kind of conforming changes in there, updating points of contact, agency information, that type of thing. But really making sure that in the strategy we have laid out solid action plans, objectives, metrics, etc., for how we're going to achieve those strategic initiatives. Overall, the SCIP is organized into these 7 categories: introduction, background, how the SCIP was developed. The 2 most critical sections in the SCIP are Section 4, current statewide assessment, and then Section 5, our strategy. And I should say that Section 5 there really becomes critical, particularly when we're talking about Homeland Security grant funding and even other types of funding. The SCIP ties into the national plan, it ties into state Homeland Security strategy, it ties into our emergency response plan. So this SCIP kind of impacts everybody, and that's why we think it's critical to look at it every year and get feedback from folks, find out how folks are using it. It's not just a tool kind of for our office to implement our activities, but it's really a foundational supporting document that local agencies can use when mapping out what their strategy is and requesting grant funds, etc. So as I mentioned this year, we want to validate and continue to flesh out the action plans for those key strategic initiatives, and also incorporate in and make sure that our SCIP gives us the baseline strategy for moving forward with broadband. We're not going to do a wholesale revision related to broadband this year. Last year we did include a number of initiatives and objectives that talked about the National Public Safety Broadband, but we do want to make sure that with this major federal grant funding coming up, that our SCIP adequately addresses broadband so that we're able to take advantage of that funding. We are going to do a review of accuracy, currency, and relevancy, and in fact, we've already started that, and having conversations over the last several months with stakeholders to update the content. But the key focus this year is going to be on May 22nd, our SCIP implementation workshop. This will be an all-day workshop at the Carnegie Center, which is just down the road here, where we actually, I think we've had our SCIP workshop there the last several years. And the key purpose is to kind of take what we've learned over Goal 1 and Goal 2, make sure that all of the initiatives line up, and then again, develop those action plans and, in some cases, the business model for implementing those action plans. I'm not going to go too full into all of this right now, just so that we can keep moving, but I do want to encourage everyone, particularly commissioners and all of our stakeholders, to set aside that May 22nd date for the strategic planning. Many of you I know are working on your own strategic plans, and I would encourage you to come here and help to provide input as we map out our future plan here. And again, online, these links are hyperlinked. I should also mention this is a federal technical assistance that's provided every year to each state. So there are two components to the workshop. One is the SCIP update component. The second component of it, and actually it will probably be the beginning, is a national level overview of NACP Goal 2 and an update on where things stand there. And in particular, it's a chance for us to provide feedback to the Office of Emergency Communications, both on NACP Goal 2 and what their initiatives will be moving forward based on that data. So with that, one of the handouts in your packet there are the list of our existing 12 strategic initiatives. And today I wanted to go through our initiatives and gather your feedback on if these are still the right initiatives, if you have thoughts or comments on any of these, if there are things that you say, you know what, it's time we moved away from that. Now's kind of the time to get that conversation going so that when we lead into that workshop on May 22nd, we have a foundation to address these. The handout will probably be a little bit easier to review on some of these slides, the particular strategic initiatives. Governance is a section that we've been working on now since the PSCC office, actually since 2007, since the establishment of the SCIP. Governance has kind of been a key focus of this commission in the state. The three initiatives that we have, initially we were very state-focused, and with the expand and implement our governance model and plan, and then the two initiatives or objectives underneath it. We've also added in the develop regional communications governance structures, the developing of the TICPs and CASM, which we talked about at the last meeting. We'll actually hit up again later in this meeting. Meeting our NACP goals, developing strategies or implementing strategies on a state level to meet the different national level goals that we have to follow, whether it's the NACP or FEMA, OEC, et cetera, even the FCC mandates. These initiatives, particularly Initiative 3 there, has been a lot of what we've focused our office's attention on over the past year. We're starting to build out more regional governance structures, and I expect over the next 2 years we're going to see more progress made on that level as well. Are there any thoughts or comments on the governance-related initiatives?
Dan, well, I kind of, in some ways, thought we'd be further down the road in governance. We've started this thing since 2007, and it just seems to move and install and move and install, especially in terms of kind of a global governance environment. So I think we're a little behind, I guess is the thing, and I think it probably deserves some energy as we move forward.
Thank you. In fact, and that reminded me, I should also mention that during the workshop, we're not going to be able to go through all 12 initiatives, and I believe there are now 37 strategic objectives and developing action plans for each of those. So as we're going through these, if there are those initiatives in particular that you think we should be focusing on, such as our improving our governance, please provide that feedback as well.
Yeah, question for you. Are there other states, or have you seen it where governance has worked better or is more of a priority?
I think there's some good models out there.
Okay.
I think Minnesota and Tennessee, there's several of them out there that governance it's not flashy, it doesn't come in a box.
Right.
And but it's the frame of the car, it's the infrastructure that everything else is dependent on. And so yeah, I think there are a couple of best practices out there for me.
Yeah, that'd be helpful if you could help us with that too.
And the SOP lane, establishing a framework for policy standards and procedures and implementing those PSCs and SOPs statewide. We have a number of different objectives here. This is one of the areas where we included a statement related to broadband, and specifically, I believe that's objective 5 there, develop a statewide public safety broadband integration and implementation strategy and related standards. The other objectives there are ones we've had for quite some time, in particular the communications SOPs and SOP templates, promoting the use of plain language, encoded substitutions. Both of those did a lot of work last year during the Goal 2 process and raising awareness about those, and then this year as part of our Goal 2 gap closure process, we have a number of templates and resources that we're going to be distributing out to the counties. And the technology lane is one of the largest lanes that we have. Initiative 5, enhance and promote the AIRS interoperable communication solution. This is one that we had adjusted the language last year. The key objective, which our SIEC is going to begin working on, is the developing and implementing a next generation AIRS plan. Initiative 6, the core of most stakeholders' grant applications is the implement, enhance, and promote functional regional systems in support of interoperable communications, with the emphasis there being on partnerships, shared systems, shared development costs, that sort of thing, and then the connections between those regional systems. And again, under that one, we have another NPSBN milestone, the programming of the national interop channels into emergency responder radios. Last year, with the approval of the Arizona Interoperable Channels Plan, we established that as a statewide standard, if you will, and during the natural cycle of reprogramming radios, and in particular with narrowbanding this year, we expect that to have significant progress. From a high-level infrastructure level, one of the most important things to the state is upgrading the statewide microwave backbone to digital technology. As you can see, the southern loop is complete. Many of you have probably heard Kevin's presentation on their efforts to expand that out. The key thing there is the subject of funding availability, and either this summer or later this fall, we'll have another update on where things stand with the microwave. But that initiative and Initiative 6 are kind of the core for what we're trying to do here in Arizona. Initiative 8, the Strategic Technology Reserve. The base of that was already established through the 2007 PSCC grant program, but we do continue to work in that area, particularly county emergency managers and stuff with bullfrogs, with toads, working on TICPs, making sure that those deployment procedures, et cetera, are in place. And this initiative helps to provide kind of that rationale for counties to develop strategic technology reserves as well. Initiative 9, this initiative, the Upfield Trade Operable Communication Systems for State Agencies in support of interoperable communications. Again, an initiative that DPS has the lead on, along with the microwave, and this is kind of the tandem to the microwave and the progress that DPS is making. Initiatives 10 and 11 in our training and exercise level. We've had a lot of talk, particularly about CONLs and CONTs over the last year. Initiative 10, developing a training plan to address interoperable communications, working with the county emergency manager and ADEM on the statewide multi-year test to ensure that communications is focused both on the training and exercise component for their training and exercise plan. The AIRS training statewide, we have that completed. And again, ensuring last year ADEM's vital connections and vigilant guard exercise, vital connections in particular, the interop condom exercise leading up to vigilant guard. And then lastly, the initiative 12, that should be usage and outreach there, to create and implement an education and outreach plan in support of interoperable communications. One of our first presentations later today is on our statewide outreach plan, which we first approved last year. And all the outreach we've been doing over the years with related to NECP, interoperable communications, narrowbanding, etc. This particular initiative we've had to scale back due to staffing considerations, but as much as we can, we've been pushing forward, particularly when it comes to narrowbanding and where we stand on that. So those are the 12 high-level strategic initiatives. Any further thoughts and comments about those? Are we where we need to be with these initiatives to continue moving forward? Are there initiatives that need to be looked at and addressed? Are there initiatives that need to, we've completed them and we really don't need to be prioritizing them anymore?
Dan Wilson. I don't know if it's a new initiative or we roll it into something else, but I think we need to start having a conversation about sustainability. We've had a huge influx of grant dollars from, throughout the last many, many years, and a lot of it's on acquisition, and we have not seen those same kind of things in terms of maintenance or replacement. We have an awful lot of equipment that's on the ground now that'll start reaching end of life status. Trying to start taking care of or looking at replacement of what we've already got, I think is something we need to have a conversation about. I think we may have built something that may be awkward for us to take care of. So I think we should maybe have that conversation. Unless you're going to have continued cases of Kruger animals. But, some of the only initiatives out there, some of the UASI, USAR initiatives are some of the few that have recurring grant dollars attached to maintenance and replacement. So much of the capital expenditures we've made were one-time awards. And so I think we're in a danger of not having a sustainable environment as we go forward.
Just have a question as far as priority. So 12 initiatives is a lot of initiatives. Is this in order of importance, or is there an order of importance, and how has that been weighted in the past?
And that's actually a good question. This is not an order of importance. This is organized in terms of the five lanes of the interoperability continuum, governance, SOPs, etc. Some of the short and medium-term ones, short-term ones, I guess, are higher priority, medium being the ones a little further out. In looking at this, a lot of these short-term ones we have brought to a mature level. For example, the statewide education and outreach plan. There's an awful lot of implementing that plan as an ongoing program. The statewide strategic technology reserve, for example. It's another example where we've sustainability, again, how that SDR is going to be managed longer term, how the education and outreach plan is going to be sustained longer term.
So let me just piggyback on that for a second. So this is not my area of expertise, but applying other models, from where I have experience like ITIL or CCLI, a lot of what they talk about is maturity models, right? And a lot of times you have to make a decision as to what level of maturity you are trying to accomplish, because a level 5 maturity comes at a specific cost, so you might not necessarily have an organization that's willing to pay for a level 5 maturity, and so level 2 might be good enough in a specific area. And so I think that might be something that we need to go through as we're looking at this, as to where are we today, where are we trying to achieve, and what is the cost to get to that level, and are we willing to pay it?
Nirvana's a pricey animal.
It's a very pricey animal. Like a unicorn.
Absolutely, and I think the priority conversations, the issues back to governance again, how far along are we? These are excellent topics.
Yeah, and that's the way ITEL is matured, right? So with the different versions of ITEL, they focus on different models and service delivery. So yes, there's 5 lanes, but you might be just focused on lane 1 and 2 for a year, or as you're trying to get to a certain maturity level. So I think that's part of the conversation I think we have to look at as well. So how do you prioritize on what?
Are there any other thoughts or comments on these strategic initiatives or objectives? Great. Up on the screen, I've got the SCIP revision timeline. As I mentioned, we're just kind of kicking off this effort today. We'll also be having a discussion with the SIEC at their May meeting regarding this. We'll be sending out an initial track changes version of SCIP for public comment here very shortly. The May 22nd, the SCIP implementation workshop down the street at Carnegie Center, with our initial draft revision coming around June 4th based on all the feedback that we get between now and SCIP workshop plus during the workshop, with the end goal of having an action item at the July PSCC meeting to update SCIP for this year. Any other questions?
Thank you, Joseph.
Thank you very much.
Next on the agenda is Susan to give an update on the 2012 statewide education and outreach plan.
Hello, Commissioners. Luckily, that was a great segue. This is the last strategic initiative that Justin talked about. We're going to get right into it. I'm just going to discuss the background of the statewide education and outreach plan, the structure, our annual review and update, which we've actually been working on for a while, discussion of some proposed revisions, and then our process and timeline. So this plan, and Justin, I think you mentioned it, it was developed last year, and it was approved almost a year ago now, just about a year ago. But the purpose is to meet the needs for Strategic Initiative 12. The plan itself provides information and resources about interoperable communications initiatives and also directives that impact the state. It encourages participation and gives direction to our stakeholders to support their education and outreach efforts. And most importantly, when we mention stakeholders, giving direction to stakeholders, it's not just for members of our PSCC office, it's for stakeholders statewide. As I mentioned, it was approved last year, April 19th. We've included a hyperlink to that plan. The outreach plan includes 7 sections. The introduction section, of course, has some information on the background and the purpose of the document. Section 2 are the goals that are supported by the plan, which include engaging stakeholders as messengers, also combining everyone's efforts and leveraging knowledge to move forward. The 3rd section, fundamental messages, gives some basic information about communications interoperability, the fact that it stays live. Also, that planning and outreach in terms of interoperable communications should be high up on everyone's list of priorities. Number 4, the 4th section is about outreach tactics that can be used to communicate information and the resources that are included in the plan. Tactics include meetings, electronic resources, print and visual resources as well. Section 5 talks about stakeholder roles for leadership, technical staff, communication staff, non-governmental organizations, PIOs, etc. There's also an appendix at the end that lists some entities that fall into those categories. Section 6, targeted interoperability topics. Those are the key areas of priority for outreach efforts for the year of the plan. So we're moving from the 2011 plan to the 2012 plan. And then the last section, next steps, the intent is for stakeholders to share their lessons learned, share the good and the bad, so that we can all cooperate to move the state forward for communications and to become truly interoperable. As I mentioned, we are in the midst of conducting our annual review and update. Those updates will incorporate the 2012 priorities in regard to interoperable communications. Section 6, the targeted interoperability topics, will be the focus for these revisions. That section with the specific topics does include background and supporting materials for each of the topics. Down at the bottom of this slide, the topics for 2011 were FTC narrowbanding compliance, interoperable channel usage, that includes regional channels, national channels, errors, etc., and NECP goals, CASM, and TIC-Ps. Our proposed revisions, taking into consideration the feedback that we've already received and also developments such as broadband at both federal and state levels, we recommend updating the FCC narrowbanding compliance topic, including a new topic, National Public Safety Broadband Network, and updating and expanding the NECP goals to be NECP Goal 2 gap closure, including regional interoperability planning, CASM, TIC-Ps, SCAMPs, as well as other resources such as CASM and errors. Now, the discussion point at the bottom, are these the right key outreach topics for this year? I'm going to hold that thought over to our next slide. This will give you a better idea of what we want to include. As I mentioned, FCC narrowbanding compliance is a topic. This is not a change to a topic. Rather, it's including additional resources that have become available since last year's publication. The second topic, National Public Safety Broadband Network, this would actually replace the interoperable channel usage, which would get bumped down, I'll tell you in just a moment. It's important to note that wireless broadband is not going to take the place of land mobile radio. It will supplement it. So this would give information about the background, the Bill 3630, and also our state and PSCC office involvement. And then the third topic, NECP Goal 2 gap closure. As I mentioned, the interoperable channel usage would no longer be a standalone topic. Instead, it would be moved under this area. And it would also include information about the NECP Goal 2 outcomes, support for regional interoperability planning efforts, as I mentioned a moment ago, CASM, errors, and also development of TIC-Ps and SCAMPs. Are there any questions about those proposed topics, the updates or changes? Fantastic. So here's our process. The PSCC office has already been soliciting stakeholder input since our January SIEC meeting. We've used some of that information already. Now that I have a level of approval from you, it's not an approval item, but agreement, we'll go ahead and email out the draft plan to the interested parties list. We'll also post it on our PSCC website and put it out for a 2-week comment period. Based on the input we received from this last comment period, we will make additional revisions if necessary. And then we plan on posting the updated version, what should be an approval draft, approximately 2 weeks prior to the July meeting of this commission in hopes of getting approval from the PSCC. Is there any further discussion or additional questions? Nothing for me to entertain then. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Next is Justin with an update on SCIP Initiative 2.1, developing TIC-Ps.
This one is not document related. It's actually a pretty exciting one. Okay, my definition of exciting, I know, is not everyone else's. But this does actually come back to kind of what Dan was talking about earlier on, at least when we're talking down at a regional level, the advancement of governance. One of the key things that we found when we went through the NACP Goal 2 assessment process last year was the importance of having documented policies and procedures. And in those communities where there were clearly established policies and procedures, particularly for the request activation and deployment of communications assets, those counties did very well. Other counties where the policies and procedures was more of an ad hoc informal structure, overall there were problems meeting NACP Goal 2. So we have actually had the developing TICPs and implementing CASM in our SCIP since 2009, and we've actually made significant progress. TICPs initially, Tactical Interoperable Communications Plan, initially were required only at the UASI, and we have since expanded that out and began working with every county in Arizona to help expand that. Just a brief background. So what a TICP is it's a document that lists what those interoperable communications assets are in a county, what the governance structures are for that county for communication, the usage policies and procedures, how to request the assets, what assets are available, how do assets get deactivated and returned. Each TICP is somewhat unique for every county, although they all tend to follow a very basic template, things like priority order of use, those types of things. A well-drafted TICP will get a community incredibly far down the line in meeting the NACP goals and the requirements of the NACP. It also is a tremendously valuable asset for communications unit leaders. Over the last year, Susan, 4 Continental classes we've taught now. Coming up on our 4th Continental class, and in every single one of these Continental classes, by the end of the week, the number one question that we get is, how can I get the TICP for my county? Where do I find the TICP in these other counties? So as Continentals start to learn more about these and as TICPs become more advanced in each county, we're finding that these aren't just a plan that's going to end up sitting on a shelf, but it's actually providing a very valuable tool in response. So right now, there are currently 6 counties with TICPs. The first was the central region, or initially it was just the Phoenix-UASI TICP. They are about to complete their revision, and they've expanded it from just the Phoenix-UASI TICP to the Central Arizona Region TICP. We've had about 2 or 3 new TICPs a year. Yuma has had one since 2009. Pima County since 2010. Last year, 3 more counties completed TICPs: Pinal, Mojave, and Cochise County. Right now, with, as I mentioned, Jesse Cooper, I thought I saw him here earlier. I want to publicly call out a lot of work that he has done in getting the Arizona Central Region TICP updated and established. This was part of an OEC Technical Assistance Award that was given to the Phoenix-UASI last year for both a TICP and a Central Region Field Operations Guide. And that has been a tremendous lift that Jesse in particular spearheaded and helped to get done. So with the Central Arizona TICP has now been updated, and the FOG, I didn't see a timeline for when that was going to be. I'll tell you in the next 3 weeks. As we go through additional clarification. And the nice thing about that Field Operations Guide is that'll be the first one in Arizona, but really help to serve as a template for future efforts around the state, so that we eventually, after every county has a TICP, we can move towards essentially the Arizona equivalent of the National Field Operators Guide. Coconino County, we got a Technical Assistance Award from OEC late in the year, last year, and following their NACP Goal 2 observations, we've been working with Coconino Coconino County. Tremendous effort in both the getting this thing moving very quickly. November 29th, we held a kickoff workshop, went out, got a bunch of data from all the local communities, and then January 26th held the development workshop where we did a detailed walkthrough of their TIC-P, established the policies or drafted policies and procedures for the use of assets, got a bunch of information in there, did another kind of quick pass through the draft on February 6th, and right now it looks as if it's going to be, or at least it's planned for that TIC-P to be finalized at the LEPC meeting in April, with it being exercised at an exercise at the end of April. So Coconino County is really now in that column of having the TIC-P, although it's not been formally adopted. La Paz County is next up in the cycle. They will be having their TIC-P kickoff workshop on May 9th at the Boating Safety Center up in Parker, right next to the fire department up there. We would certainly encourage anyone from La Paz County, but also anyone in neighboring counties, if you don't have a TIC-P, to attend this kickoff workshop. The kickoff workshop essentially, it's actually not a full day, and I shouldn't have put all the way to 4 p.m. there. It's much closer to a half-day workshop. In the kickoff workshop, we walk through the entire TIC-P template. We talk about what needs to be in the TIC-P under each section. We do a quick look at what we already have in the TIC-P based off of data that has been populated in the CHASM tool. But TIC-Ps it takes a lot of work to get them done, but it's a fairly simple concept. So we encourage folks from neighboring counties to attend this TIC-P kickoff workshop to see what is done so that you can take that information back to your counties. And again, this TIC-P is also being done through a technical assistance award for this year. Moving forward this year, we're going to be doing a number of other TIC-Ps. We have a couple of grants from last year's, I believe these were SCIP funds. Both the North RAC and the South RAC submitted NECP Goal 2 gap closures grants last year, and a memo that used those grants over to the PSCC office. The North RAC had both, within the grant application, there was a priority for both a region-wide Strategic Communications Migration Plan, or SCAMP, and I guess that's the equivalent of a region-wide SCIP for that the Apache Navajo Coconino region-wide effort. And then also the development of TIC-Ps, as we mentioned, we've already got the Coconinos completed, and we'll be working on the Apache and Navajo County TIC-Ps, as well as other Goal 2 gaps up to the funding allocation there. And in the South RAC is actually very far along. The only county that does not have a TIC-P right now in the South RAC is Santa Cruz County, and so we'll be working using some of that grant dollars to complete the Santa Cruz County TIC-P. In addition, and I forgot to include this into my presentation because we just finalized this information yesterday, but through the Border Interoperability Demonstration Project, Yuma County was awarded the technical assistance to update their TIC-P. So they're going to be having a TIC-P update workshop on June 6th. We don't have the location details yet for that, but for Yuma County and other folks in that corner of the state, we would encourage you to attend that workshop. And that will be an all-day workshop where they'll go through their existing TIC-P, update it to include all the new assets over since 2009, as well as all the assets that were incorporated as part of the BID-P project. So as you can see, this year we've already got 3 underway, with 2 more about to kick off and another 2 immediately following that, so another 7 TIC-Ps that we're looking at this year. Other efforts this year, all 13 non-UASI counties were given a TIC-P template grant application for this grant cycle. I'm mixing two things at once here. Following the observations last year, all 13 counties were given a pre-populated TIC-P template with all of the data that was received as part of the assessment process. We also gave each county that did not have a TIC-P a template grant application for them to submit during this last Homeland Security grant cycle. That cycle obviously has not completed yet, so the funding hasn't happened yet. But each of the RACs have met, and we understand the East RAC did recommend funding. That Gila County has submitted a TIC-P application, and the East RAC has made a recommendation that that grant be funded to develop a East Region TIC-P, so that instead of just a specific TIC-P for Gila County, that it actually be a TIC-P that support the whole region. In particular, because Graham, Greenlee County, Gila County, these guys are going to have to share assets. So we're excited to be working with them, assuming that application is funded. No undue influence, Director. On our website, there is the TIC-P template, the CASM import spreadsheet, all of the data, and I didn't really touch on CASM in this presentation because we've talked about it a lot in the past, but all of the data for developing the TIC-Ps really can be exported directly out of CASM and loaded into the OEC TIC-P template, which gets you about 85% of the way to having a completed TIC-P. The remainder of the effort is ensuring that, of course, all the information is validated and correct that was in there, but then going through the policies and procedures where there's already template policies and procedures there, loading in pictures of certain assets like mobile communications vehicles, things like that. But all of that information is available on our website there, and of course myself, Dr. Britt, Karen, and Susan are more than happy to work with folks on moving this forward. With that, the other thing that we're doing right now, and I can't talk too much about this, but I can mention that we have a formal request for quote that is out on the Procure AZ website, that's the state's official website, for the hiring of a subject matter expert to help facilitate tactical interoperable communications plans, TIC-Ps, as well as the strategic plans. This RFQ will be, once awarded, will be a one-year contract extendable for an additional year to allow us to work with additional contract support to go out and help counties or regions in implementing these. And so even though we're a little bit short-staffed right now, this is going to help us tremendously, in particular, bring in folks to have that background and expertise into being able to make sure that each TIC-P has in it what's needed for the county. Related to that, the Communications Asset Survey Mapping Tool, CASM, we did a quick look into it last week. Currently, there's data in there from over 357 different agencies in Arizona. So we've made significant progress over the last year in getting data into CASM. We are doing a last-minute push, and as Aaron mentioned earlier, one of the key projects that Aaron is helping us out on right now is continuing to push through our CASM grant. You may remember, I think it was 2009, AZPSIC grant that the City of Phoenix got. We've been working this grant since then. Through the generosity of Homeland Security, that grant has actually been extended one additional month. So we have through the end of May to complete this grant. So we're going out, we're requesting any additional data from agencies. If folks can provide us with that information, we still have grant funds to be able to utilize to get that loaded in there. Most of the agencies, that if they were involved in a Goal 2 assessment, odds are pretty good we have the data already. It's those agencies that might not have been directly involved in an observed event, we're reaching out to them. We're reaching out to all the agencies that are already in CASM, asking them to verify and give us any additional updates that may have occurred over the last few years. And beyond when that particular project expires, we also have two other grants that we're working on that will allow us to continue to keep continue to advance in TICPs and strategic plans in Arizona. So with that, that's kind of a brief update on that particular strategic initiative and where we stand, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Excellent. Thank you, Justin. Next is an update on the SIEC from Mark and Paul.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, thanks for having me. Paul couldn't be here today, so I'm sure he sends his regards. Good to hear from me again. This should be a relatively quick report since a couple of the items at the top here you either just heard about or have heard about at the last meeting, so we'll go through these. I'm sure we could do Michael Britt's whole presentation again on broadband, but I'm sure you're had about enough of that for today, so we'll skip over that. The NEPC Goal 2 Compendium of Findings, you actually were presented at your last meeting with this information from Justin, but kind of as a reminder, because sometimes we get so much stuff that we cover, is that it is on the compendium, it is on the website, and it is something a lot of us are using to kind of move forward, lessons learned, see what we can do better. Specifically, the TICPs have really come out of it that I've seen working in the county. I can speak to that. So just kind of a reminder, you have had the presentation on. This was one that I was really interested in. We have the AERS Drive test results, which I know you all have not had yet. We actually had a very nice presentation by Mike Britt where we had pictures of the van and all the things of the drive test that was done through the technical assistance grant from ICTAP. 10-day period. Very interesting how they were crammed into this van with all the radios, computers, the data gathering stuff that they were doing. But I will say, as one of the users on the end, I think that the PSCC office did do a great job of making sure all of the agencies out there were aware of what was going on. There truly were a lot of tones. I know in our dispatch center, one of our dispatchers hadn't got the message somehow or another, and I was talking to her and said, turn down your radio, turn it off. Don't select it. Oh, no, we always have to listen to this. I was like, no, not during this time. So there were a couple good things in that that came out of that. But what was interesting in the end was that the test results really were consistent with the predictive maps that DPS had come up with years ago. What I think was worthwhile out of this is it proved it. You know, there were a lot of folks that were saying, yeah, whatever, I don't believe that, there's all these gaps. Well, this proved with those maps were accurate, and I know with our experience, we've seen that we do have good coverage in the areas that we're expecting to. So, any questions on the AERS Drive tests? There are results on the website, I believe. Correct, Michael?
Not completely, not yet.
Not yet. There will be. Yeah, there will be. So we have some very nice maps available that get even more detailed into what there was there. But like I said, they're consistent with the predictive maps we have. The next update's on the Communications Unit Work Group. Again, they just continue to review applications as they come in. 4 more applicants were granted COML status. They've been added to the website also if you want to see the whole list. It's nice to see we're up to 14 folks that are now recognized as Arizona All Hazards COML, represent 4 counties. And I know there's a lot of other folks out there working on their task books. So this is moving forward. Again, we heard how that's tying back into some of the other things we're doing with TICPs, really elevating. So with that, yes, there are training courses. Some happened in April. We haven't got the update on that, but there's continuing classes going on. I know a lot of folks were looking forward to this COML training field day, but there were a few things that happened that had to be delayed. So hopefully in the fall or sometime, we'll be able to move forward with that field day. And what this will really do for a lot of the folks that have gone through the class is really help them complete parts of their task. And that's areas that they don't have an opportunity to get signed off, or it's taking them longer to get signed off in the real world. cont training courses. There had been one before our meeting. Now there's been one since here in 9 through 13. I don't have the update on that meeting. If anybody does or training that went well.
It was very successful.
Very successful.
18 students.
8. And that one was held where?
That was here in Mariposa County.
First one was?
The first one was down in Tucson.
That's what it was, Tucson. So we're moving along. Those will certainly help on the incidents as we move forward. So really, that brings us just our next agenda. Our meeting's May 8th. See there what's on our agenda. With that, any questions? Quick and painless. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Mark. Next, Justin, PSCC office, multiple project updates.
Thank you, and not breaking entirely with tradition, but we did have some updates here that I wanted to go through with you, so we're back to having both a handout and slides this time, just because I did want to highlight some of the key things that we've been working on over the last several months, but there wasn't enough for a standalone presentation on all of these. We were awarded 3 technical assistance awards this year. I already mentioned the TICP workshop for La Paz County. We're going to be working with the Division of Emergency Management and the county emergency managers on a training and exercise plan workshop. While it's technically a training and exercise plan workshop, this TA has a lot of flexibility for Arizona, so we can use this in any way to help support the multi-year TEP. And then third, the regional communications enhancement support. This was the UASI request. This particular one is for developing a strategic plan initially requested through David Felix and the RWC, but this would be to develop a strategic plan for the kind of central Arizona region, and in particular RWC, TRWC, and the other kind of major systems in this area. And looking forward, they already have a statement of about 10 agreed upon strategic objectives, and they'll be using this technical assistance to kind of lay that out in a more detailed plan over the course of this year. There were 2 additional TA requests that we had put in for. Both of those were deferred by OEC, but as you saw last year, I think we ended up the year with 7 technical assistance awards from the Fed. So those still may come about as other states don't take advantage of what they've been awarded. This information was sent down to the states last week from the Office of Emergency Communications, and I was on a conference call with all of the national SWICs just before this meeting where it was reiterated. This is the data for just Arizona, not the federal level. We are actually in a much better position than other states. But last week, the FEMA Grants Program Directorate communicated to OEC that there is a significant amount of funds, particularly from federal fiscal year 2008, but also 09, that have not been drawn down yet. And these are at risk of being reverted back to the U.S. Treasury. We're in a really good position there for fiscal year 2008 funds. 2009, I know that Lisa Hanson at Homeland Security has been reaching out to all of the IACGP grant holders, but we just wanted to reiterate here as well that if you are holding either 08, 09, or 2010 IACGP grant funds, now is the time to be requesting reimbursement from state Homeland Security so that they can draw these funds down from the Fed. It is a challenging process, and we continue to communicate to the Feds the need that, when you're dealing with a 3-year project, you've got those funds allocated now, even though you haven't requested reimbursement. You're waiting for a project to finish construction, whatever. And so they understand that many of these funds, in fact, all of the funds in Arizona have been obligated. But challenge becomes when Congress sees large balances off to the right-hand side, they want to pull that money back. So if you have expended funds and have not yet requested reimbursement, I encourage you to do so. And if you have not been engaged with State Homeland Security regarding your plans for getting by the September, well, actually, no, that's incorrect. That's the federal deadline, September. Our deadline, I believe, is coming up at the end of April, at least for the 08 fund. That may be the case with 09 as well. We've not been in touch with Homeland Security. We want to encourage folks to do that. A couple of key events. COMEL class coming up in Coconino County, April 30th. There are still a couple of slots left in that class. We would encourage folks, anyone can attend. You don't have to be from Coconino County. Unfortunately, we did need to cancel our Gila County class, COMEL class, due to low enrollment. So if there are folks in neighboring counties, we encourage you to head up there. And I do want to mention that your county may have training funds available to help pay for your travel. We don't have those funds available as part of our grant that's paying for the class, but many counties may still have training funds left that can help get you up to and stay in Coconino County for the nice cool weather, April 30th through May 3rd. La Paz County kickoff on May 9th and our SCIP workshop on May 22nd. Kind of hit up a lot of this, but I just wanted to reiterate that the CASM data on our website, the CAM user access request or the templates and other information. We encourage folks to please help us out with that as we wrap up that grant. The SIEC will be reviewing the VHF and UHF minimum equipment standards. At their next meeting, we've had some initial discussions back in January. These standards have not been reviewed since 2007, so if you would like to provide input on either of those two standards, or in the thought that was under discussion at the time, or back in January, was the addition of 700, 800 megahertz standards, kind of rolling all three of these into one minimum equipment standard. But we would like your input and thoughts on those. Narrowbanding, good news. I always like to give good news when I can. As of beginning of this last week, 75% of Arizona transmitters have modified their license to reflect either the fact that they have narrowbanded or their intent to go narrowbanded. So I think that's tremendous progress. If you remember back in the presentation, we hadn't quite reached 70% in January. We are getting a lot closer there. The downside is we still have a little over 24% that have not taken that initial step of modifying their license to the mixed mode. And that's one of the key things that during the narrowband process, you modify your license now to go into the mixed narrowband wideband mode. As you go through the transition, once you've completed the transition, then move it over to narrowband only. Excuse me, we're at 17% that have already completed the transition. About 60% of the state is in progress. We're reaching out to those folks who have not yet taken that basic step. But again, we have the FCC database, which isn't the world's most accurate. We do anticipate some of these licenses are licenses that have just not been canceled, that they're not going to be narrowbanded. But hopefully we can get some more progress made on that. And of course, as folks narrowband, we know there are a lot of agencies that have that in progress. But we've reached, I think, a significant milestone, at least getting to that 75% mark.
Justin, does anybody in Arizona have waivers? Have applied for waivers?
Pima County has applied for waivers. And if anyone's from Pima County, I believe that waiver, and I haven't read it, I believe it was on behalf of the agencies participating in the
St. Louis, they just started releasing waivers. St. Louis just got theirs.
Okay.
So we're starting to see action on those, and that is going to really impact local planning. You know, where we thought we had a drop dead date, now it's fuzzy in terms of waiver jurisdiction, so that's going to complicate things.
And the one thing I do want to emphasize that the FCC has been telling us that they don't want it viewed as a fuzzy end date. There is still a drop dead date. In order to get a waiver band, you're going to have to show a project plan, resource allocation, et cetera, to get there. The waivers that they have been looking at are things like with PC Wind, where there is a transition project plan in place, there's bond funding in place to transition off of UHF, VHF to 700, 800 megahertz system, and it makes no sense to spend money to narrowband if you're completely leaving the band. But that is a valid point for agencies in those surrounding areas. They are going to have partners that are still in the wideband mode. A new tool that the feds have released, and we sent out via our email, that'll allow you to kind of look at where things stand nationally. We are doing better than most of the country on this front, but if you'd like, there's some drill-down maps there where you can go down to the county level. You can even go down to the tower level, find out which towers are narrow, which are wide, and the big red dots, click on it, see who it is, see who the contact person is. So you can know in your community who is and is not narrowbanded. Our COMEL recognition, Mark already mentioned that. One thing I do want to mention is that we are now starting to receive some national recognition as well related to this COMEL recognition program. Arizona, and the great work Susan in particular has done on this, Arizona has now been asked to participate on a panel nationally with a couple of other states to talk about our recognition program and establishing best practices nationwide for COMEL recognition, credentialing, et cetera. Those webinars, et cetera, are going to be eventually will be publicly hosted by OEC, but they're going to be starting off, I believe, as a NICSWIC, National Council of Statewide Interoperability Coordinators webinars. Just finished the COMEL class down in Sierra Vista. I mentioned we have the one coming up in Flagstaff, and we finished that cont course, again utilizing the 2011 SCIP funding, and I want to thank Maricopa County and the Phoenix Rocky for those funds for that. 18 students participated there. We did have some procurement issues to us, field day postponement, but for folks who are able to assist with the planning of that field day, I would just contact Susan. We are going to continue planning and working that, although it won't most likely be held until after fire season now. With that, a bunch of upcoming meetings. Our next meeting, official PSCC meeting is in July at Flagstaff. We encourage you all to make your reservations now. The PSCC meeting will be held at Lee's building, the Law Enforcement Administration building this year. Before that, though, is the May 22nd SCIP Communication Workshop at the Carnegie Center just down the street. And with that, are there any questions from commissioners on any of the projects we've got, or there are a number of things in that handout that I did not go over? So if you have questions on those or anything else, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you very much, Justin. And with that, the last agenda item is a call to the public for the written requests. Okay. If there's no other comments or action, we will call this meeting adjourned. Thank you all very much.